Kevin Barry was 18 years old when he was hanged in Mountjoy Jail on November 1, 1920. His death at such a young age is possibly the most poignant in recent Irish history. As a child, he went to the National School in Rathvilly. In 1915 he was sent to live in Dublin and attended the O'Connell schools for 3 months, before enrolling in the preparatory grade at St. Mary's College, Rathmines, in September 1915. He remained at that school until the 31st of May 1916 when it was closed by its clerical sponsors. During this period he was undoubtedly affected by the events in April of the Easter Rising. In the same period at St. Mary's he also attended a commemoration concert for the Manchester martyrs, who were hanged in England in 1867. These events served to incite his nascent nationalism to the extent that he expressed his desire to join Constance Markiewicz's Fianna Éireann. His family attempted to dissuade him, but one sister later expressed the belief that he did join. He enrolled in Belvedere College in 1916 and joined the Irish Volunteers, a nationalist organization. With the closure of St. Mary's College, Barry transferred to Belvedere College, a Jesuit school in Dublin. He was a substitute on the Championship Junior Rugby Cup team, and earned a place on the senior team. In 1918 he became secretary of the school hurling club which had just been formed, and was one of their most enthusiastic players. At the age of 16, he was introduced by Sean O'Neill and Bob O'Flanagan to the Clark-Luby Club of the Irish Republican Brotherhood, and at some point in time he was sworn as a member of this secret society which was led by Michael Collins. Barry's activities in Dublin focused on training and operations to acquire weapons and ammunition. Training sites were regularly shifted to avoid discovery, but the extent of training that Barry received is questionable. Although he served in the Volunteers for almost 3 years, his operational experience prior to the Monk's Bakery ambush was somewhat limited. For the most part, volunteers in Dublin did little other than training and fusil action, or heard shots fired in anger. He took part in a number of small operations including a raid on the Shamrock Works for weapons intended for the Royal Irish Constabulary, and a raid on Marks of Capel Street, looking for ammunition and explosives. Barry's one significant action prior to Monk's Bakery was the raid for weapons on a military outpost at King's Inn on Constitution Hill. The Dublin Brigade had carefully reconnoitred the site and developed an operations plan to be completed within 7 minutes. On the 1st of June 1920, a hand-picked team from the Dublin Brigade's 3 battalions attacked the site, taking the 25 soldiers by surprise and seizing the available weapons. Within only 6 minutes the raiders had secured rifles, light machine guns, and large quantities of ammunition, and had departed the site with no casualties. 2 Dublin volunteers had noticed that a British Army lorry guarded by an armed party of soldiers made twice-weekly trips to Monk's Bakery on Church Street to obtain bread. Based on these observations, John Joe Carroll of Company H conducted a reconnaissance of the bakery. In addition to its main entrance on Church Street, he observed that the bakery yard was also accessible by a corridor leading from a shop on North King Street. He concluded that this made the bakery an attractive site for an ambush like the one conducted in June at King's Inn. On the morning of the 20th of September 1920, Barry went to Mass, then joined a party of IRA volunteers on Bolton Street in Dublin. Their orders were to ambush a British Army lorry as it picked up a delivery of bread from the bakery, and capture their weapons. The ambush was scheduled for 11 a.m., which gave him enough time to take part in the operation and return to class in time for an examination he had at 2 p.m. The truck arrived late, and was under the command of Sergeant Banks. Armed with a .38 Mauser Parabellum, Barry and members of C Company were to surround the lorry, disarm the soldiers, take the weapons, and escape. He covered the back of the vehicle and, when challenged, the 5 soldiers complied with the order to lay down their weapons. A shot was then fired. Terry Golway, author of For the Cause of Liberty, suggests it was possibly a warning shot from an uncovered soldier in the front. Barry and the rest of the ambush party then opened fire. His gun jammed twice and he dived for cover under the vehicle. His comrades fled and he was left behind. He was then spotted and arrested by the soldiers. One of the soldiers, Private Harold Washington, had been shot dead. 2 others, Privates Marshall Whitehead and Thomas Humphreys, were both badly wounded and later died of their wounds. Barry was placed in the back of the lorry with the young body of Private Harold Washington, and was subjected to some abuse by Washington's comrades. He was transported then to the North Dublin Union. Upon arrival at the barracks he was taken under military police escort to the defaulter's room where he was searched and handcuffed. A short while later, 3 sergeants of the Lancashire Fusiliers and 2 officers began the interrogation. He gave his name and an address of 58 South Circular Road, Dublin, and his occupation as a medical student, but refused to answer any other questions. The officers continued to demand the names of other Republicans involved in the ambush. At this time a publicity campaign was mounted by Sinn Féin. Barry received orders on the 28th of October from his brigade commander, Richard McKee, to make a sworn affidavit concerning his torture in the North Dublin Union. Arrangements were made to deliver this through Barry's sister, Kathy, to Desmond Fitzgerald, Director of Publicity for Sinn Féin, with the object of having it published in the world press, and particularly in the English papers, on Saturday the 30th of October. Reports of his torture in Mountjoy Jail soon circulated, but Barry refused to name his comrades. He was given a death sentence, but it was widely believed that this sentence would be commuted, and that the British authorities would not dare to execute an 18-year-old. As the deadline approached, it became clear that Kevin Barry would be executed. A planned rescue by Michael Collins came to nothing when reinforcements from Dublin Castle were ordered to the prison because of the large crowds that had gathered outside. It was reported that Barry had requested to be shot by firing squad rather than hanged, which he viewed as a death not befitting a soldier. The hangman, Ellis, had to be brought into the country from England, as no one in Ireland could be found for the job. The calmness and bravery the young Barry showed in the hours leading up to his execution has become the stuff of legends. Despite protestations from clerics and politicians alike, he was hanged in Mountjoy Jail on November 1, 1920. On the 20th of October, at 10 o'clock, the 9 officers of the court, ranging in rank from brigadier to lieutenant, took their places at an elevated table. At 10:25, Kevin Barry was brought into the room by a military escort. Then Sean O'Acute sought a short adjournment to consult his client. The court granted this request. After the short adjournment, Barry announced as a soldier of the Irish Republic, "I refuse to recognize the court." Brigadier Onslow explained the prisoner's perilous situation and that he was being tried on a capital charge. He did not reply. Oakutwadi then rose to tell the court that since his client did not recognize the authority of the court, he himself could take no further part in the proceedings. Barry was charged on 3 counts of the murder of Private Marshal Whitehead. One of the bullets taken from Whitehead's body was of .45 caliber, while all witnesses stated that Barry was armed with a .38 Mauser parabellum. The Judge Advocate General informed the court that the Crown had only to prove that the accused was one of the party that killed 3 British soldiers, and every member of the party was technically guilty of murder. In accordance with military procedure, the verdict was not announced in court. He was returned to Mountjoy, and at about 8 o'clock that night, the district court-martial officer entered his cell and read out the sentence, death by hanging. The public learned on the 28th of October that the date of execution had been fixed for the 1st of November. Barry spent the last day of his life preparing for death. His ordeal focused world attention on Ireland. Barry joked about his death with his sister Kathy. "Well, they are not going to let me like a soldier fall. But I must say they are going to hang me like a gentleman." This was, according to Cronin, a reference to George Bernard Shaw's The Devil's Disciple, the last play Kevin and his sister had seen together. On the 31st of October, he was allowed 3 visits of 3 people each, the last of which was taken by his mother, brother and sisters. Kevin Barry was hanged on the 1st of November, after hearing 2 masses in his Barry's body was buried at 1:30 in the afternoon, in a plot near the women's prison. His comrade and fellow student Frank Flood was buried alongside him 4 months later. A plain cross marked their graves and those of Patrick Moran, Thomas Whelan, Thomas Traynor, Patrick Doyle, Thomas Bryan, Bernard Ryan, Edmund Foley and Patrick Maher, who were hanged in the same prison before the Anglo-Irish Treaty of July 1921, which ended hostilities between Irish Republicans and the British. The men had been buried in unconsecrated ground on the jail property, and their graves went unidentified until 1934. They became known as the Forgotten 10 by Republicans campaigning for the bodies to be reburied with honor and proper rites. On the 14th of October 2001, the remains of these 10 men were given a state funeral and moved from Mountjoy Prison to be reinterred at Glasnevin Cemetery in Dublin. Thank you for watching Death Row.